If I may have your attention for just a moment, we are delayed about 2 more minutes. There is another family whose GPS took them to the wrong location, so they are recalibrating. Actually, they are less than 2 minutes away, and I think, no names, all right? But part of Brad's family, all right? So 2 more minutes and then we'll get started. We've cranked the coolers up a bit so it'll keep the air fresher in here for you. If you start freezing, okay, wave at me, okay, and then we'll make an adjustment. If you don't wave at me, it's going to stay where it is right now, all right? So about 2 minutes, we'll get started. You're welcome. Well, good afternoon. I am so grateful that all of you have come out today. Many of you I know, and there's a lot of you that I don't know, so let me introduce myself only for the sake of reference. My name is Tim. I have the privilege of being pastor here at New Hope, and for the last 3 years, I've had the privilege of being Brad's pastor. And I say privilege, and I am not understating that in the least. Brad was the first or second one here most Sunday mornings. I usually arrive about 5:30, and it was not unusual for Brad to be here before 7 o'clock. And he would assist our coffee cart person, getting the coffee cart out and getting the heaters going if it was wintertime. And I thanked Brad from the very first time I met him. I thanked him. I said, "You have no idea how good it is for me for you to be here." Because I said, I am the shortest man in the church. And I no longer have that distinction anymore. And Brad's temperament and nature, and most of you know that is why this room is full, and it's why there's about 60 to 70 people in the overflow, all right? And I have to tell you, coming out of this past year, this is one of the single largest services folks have attended in person. So that's a tribute to Brad himself. And this is a privilege I wished I didn't have today. I am honored, but I wish this was a long time in the future. It was Sunday morning, almost 3 weeks ago now. It'll be 3 weeks ago tomorrow morning that there was, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, 8. Okay, that 8th row back. Oh, there, you're sitting there. Raise your hand. Come on, there we go. All right, that row was Brad's row. All right, and that guy who raised his hand and his brother and sister-in-law, they all sat there together in the 8 o'clock service. And 3 weeks ago, I asked Frank, "Where's Brad?" Because they're not as early as Brad was to church. I'm not pointing to whose fault it is, all right? And he said, hey, we talked to him. He said he wasn't feeling well. We're going by right after service. And as most of you know, they did. And they found Brad not responsive at the time. And he spent the next 5 days in ICU. And then it was time for him to enter into the Father's house. And we are so grateful for the joy in the midst of loss that we have a knowing that death doesn't have the last word over Brad. Life does. And if there's anything that Brad would want shared in this service today, it's the idea of transformation. We don't have to allow our baggage or our problems to be that which determines our destiny and our outcome. And certainly through his life, Brad proved that transformation literally is possible from the depths of despair. And so that's going to be the testimony that we hope to attempt to convey to all of you today. So for those of you who are family, and you are a big family, all right? You are a big family. And I am glad that you could be together. And I certainly don't want to make any of you mad because there's far too many of you for me to run away from. So, but I'm glad you're together. You guys share common memories, common love, common times with Brad. And your association with Brad with each other is what makes today a little bit easier. So thank you for sharing this challenging moment together. The vast rest of you are friends to this family or friends of Brad himself. And so thank you for being here. It means a lot to the family members to know that somebody that meant so much to them meant so much to you in all different areas and walks of Brad's life. So thank you for the encouragement your presence brings to them. And I'm a pastor and you're sitting in church, and I'm glad God is here. That is my bias. God shows up at every service like this, no matter where it's held. Over the year of COVID, I did memorial services in a lot of unusual places. I had never done them before. I did them in parks, I did them in backyards, I did them in living rooms. I did 2 in bars. Never done that before. Talk about a mixing of the spirits, all right, that day. It was, but God showed up at every place. And the reason he doesn't force his way in. He doesn't demand that you give him 1 second of attention. But he shows up because he made a promise several thousand years ago. And the promise is this. He said, I am the God of all comfort. There's 2 things to recognize in that very simple statement. Number 1, the fact that we're going to need comfort tells us that we live in a life that has trouble and problems. If you ever hear a preacher try to tell you that if you become a Christian, you don't have to worry about problems anymore, you run from that person as fast as you possibly can and make sure you have your checkbook and credit cards with you, because that is a lie. Okay? God tells us in this world you will have trouble, but he also says, I will be the God of all comfort. I am your ever-present stay, your stability in the midst of the challenges of life. And so God shows up to keep that promise. He's waiting for us to turn our attention towards him. I do want to say hello to all of you in the barn, all right? Thank you for being here. You are part of this family as well today. I think that what makes a difference in difficult times is what's our perspective. And sometimes it takes a difficult moment for us to get a right perspective. Perspective determines the outcome of so many things that we go through in life. And let me see if I can set a valuable perspective for us today. It seems that there was a talented young man who lived in the Midwest. There were some terrible fires going on in Yellowstone National Park, and it was burning thousands of acres. This young man was gifted with a camera, and he could capture the heart of a crisis like no other photographer had been able to do. So a well-known national magazine hired this young man to go get a picture that would be in the cover story of their magazine. The young man packed his bags, his camera, and his film, and he left on assignment for the fires at Yellowstone. This national magazine asked him to capture and show the heroic measures of firefighters. When the young photographer arrived at the scene, he ran into a problem he had not anticipated. He realized that the smoke was so dark and so thick and so low to the ground, it made it impossible for him to capture in a picture what was taking place on the ground. So the young man called his office, sought permission to charter a small plane that could take him above so they could take the picture from the top down. The magazine made arrangements at the local airport and then informed the photographer that a small plane and a pilot was waiting for him on the runway. He jumped into his rental car, rushed to the airport. There was a young man sitting in a small engine aircraft. As instructed, the plane was fueled and it was ready to take off. The young photographer had his camera and his film ready, and he threw all the gear into the back seat of the plane, closed the door, and said, "Ready, take off." The young man proceeded down the runway. It was a bit of a bumpy takeoff. It was a little rough, kind of unstable. And finally they got into the air, and the pilot looked over at the photographer and said, "Well, how was that?" The young talented photographer had not expected such a jerky takeoff, but he requested that the pilot fly over the park, and then he asked the pilot to fly real low over the flames. The cameraman was a little distraught over how unstable the plane seemed to be flying. It was going to be tough to get a clear shot bouncing around as much as they were. When he made the request to fly low, the pilot looked over him and said, "What do you want to do that for?" And the cameraman said, "I'm on assignment. I'm a photographer. Photographers need to be close to the action to take good pictures." This young pilot was quiet for a few moments. Then he broke the silence with this statement, "You're a photographer? I thought you were my flight instructor." How we look at things often determines the outcome of the circumstances that we go through, and we have a story to tell today. It's Brad's story, and there are parts of his story that are a little bit shaky, but the good news is he found an experienced pilot these last 3 years of his life, and it made all the difference in the world. Perspective changes the way in which we see things. I hope as a result of our time honoring Brad today, that maybe a perspective of his life will help us to see things better, clearer, and most of all, more hopeful. Brad was born 61 years ago in Fresno, California. Do you remember what hospital you were in? No. Well, we do know it was September the 14th, 1959, and it was a Monday. He was born on Monday, all right? He didn't want to miss any of the week, all right? So he showed up early. Dwight D. Eisenhower was president at the time of his birth, and there were some classic movies released the year that he was born. Charlton Heston starred in Ben-Hur, the story of Christ from a different perspective, but a famous movie. Marilyn Monroe, Tony Curtis, and Jack Lemmon. Anybody want to guess that movie? You all went and watched it, huh? You know, that was an R-rated movie for that day and age. All right, that was racy. And then my favorite, Rio Bravo, with John Wayne, Dean Martin, all right, and Ricky Nelson. Yeah, all right. Several of you are over 60 in this group, I can tell. Hit songs that were released that year, and there were some big ones. Frankie Avalon had his famous Venus, was released that year. Paul Anka, all right, Lonely Boy, and Put Your Head on My Shoulder. You two have no idea about either one of those songs, do you? All right, ask your dad to play them for you, all right? Yeah, they were pretty good. The Platters had the classic Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. And Elvis had one in the top 10 that year called Big Hunk of Love, all right? I got to be honest, apparently not very many famous people wanted to be born on September the 14th. Usually I'm having to cut out names to throw in. I only found one recognizable name who shared a birthday, and it just happens to be the same year as well. And that was Mary Crosby, the actress who was the daughter of Bing Crosby. But she shared the exact same birthday, the exact same year. Brad's parents were Frank, and Frank passed away in 2005, and Betty is still with us, sitting right here front and center with that big sassy smile on her face. And he shared his parents with 3 brothers and 3 sisters. I got to tell you this about this lady right here. All right, I already told her coming in, my mom's in heaven, and so for this Mother's Day, she's going to be my mother. All right, any woman who could have 7 kids in 6.5 years. Just sort of let that settle in on you for a moment. All right, all right. That's more than 1 a year. All right. Now, granted, she did 2 at a time, twice. All right. That's miraculous in itself, all right? And she's still smiling, all right? But I'm not surprised you wouldn't remember which hospital, all right? I wouldn't either after all these kids. So here's the family lineage. Pam, the oldest in the... Oh, I'm not supposed to say that, am I? I know, but I'm not supposed to say that, all right? Pam and her husband Jim live in Atascadero. Mike and his wife Kathy live in Galt, California. Rebecca and her husband Steve live in Arroyo Grande. And she is one of the sets of twins, all right? And connected to her is Randy and his wife Susie. The other part of that first set of twins, they live in Eagle, Idaho. I'm jealous. I would like to live in Eagle, Idaho. Then Frank Nelson and Becky, and that's really my connection also to Brad is with and through them, and they reside in Clovis, and Brenda O'Hearn, and she is Brad's younger twin sister, all right? And so she lives in Bakersfield. Brad enjoyed 20 nieces and nephews and 14 great nieces and nephews. So if you are part of that family, all right, raise your hands, all right? I think most of you are on these first 6 rows, 3 rows, all right. All right, it's a big family. Brad grew up in Fresno, and he loved playing Little League baseball and soccer. He attended McLean High School, and he graduated in 1978. Brad lived his entire life in the Fresno-Clovis area, except for the times that he was fighting fires in other places, which leads me into his occupation. The people of the U.S. Forestry Service were Brad's second family. Lifelong friendships that he made with 40-plus years of service were tested and proved over many years of working together. He began his career right out of high school by serving a 2-year stint with the California Conservation Corps. And during that time, he quickly decided that mountains were his passion. He joined the U.S. Forestry Service right after that and served in a lot of capacities, including on the engine crew, on fire patrol, as a hot shot, rappelling from the helicopter as a heli-tac crewman. In more recent years, he served his time as a deck coordinator, a helibase manager, a helicopter manager, all jobs that he loved and was planning to continue on contract in the year 2021 fire season. He was based out of the Sierra Nevadas, but he fought fires throughout the United States. He retired from the Forestry Department after 30 years, but for the last 4 years continued to do contract work with them and was anticipating doing it again. One of my favorite stories in visiting with the family about him working was when it was time to fight fires and they had to be in the mountains carrying a backpack. His backpack was just like everybody else's backpack, all right? And where he found the greatest joy was when they were coming down the mountain. While everybody else was walking, he simply flopped back on his back and he slid down on his backpack, just waving as he went by people. So I love that story. If you are here and you served with him either in the California Conservation Corps or in the U.S. Forestry Department, would you raise your hand? Family, and leave them up for, look at that. Oh, that is awesome. Thank you all. Thank you all. And I'm sure there are some stories y'all could tell, all right? Brad's got stories that are BC and AD, all right? Before he knew Christ and after he knew Christ. And the stories would be very different. And so during the reception time, it'll kind of just be an open time if folks want to stand up and share a story. Do remember the BC and the AD thing, all right? And remember his mother is present, all right? So as you think about what you're going to tell, remember that. His hobbies, his hobbies were adventuresome. Just as his career was adventuresome, so were his hobbies. Corvettes and Harleys. And you've seen some of them out there, all right? Guns and knives. They did leave the guns and knives at home. I thought I would have a few to display on the table, but they left those at home. reading, and he had an interest from Louis L'Amour to World War II history, and that's displayed on this table here at the front as well. He was into cycling, and if you noticed, his truck parked in its normal spot where it would be on a Sunday morning also has the newest hobby that he had taken up, and that is he bought a bike without a motor, and he got into cycling these last few years. He did lots of traveling with his job, and of course the job is probably the reason that his first love for travel was the mountains. He enjoyed the mountains both for work and for play, but he also loved the coast, and Pismo was one of his favorite areas to attend. He enjoyed food. He liked to eat. Tuna casserole kind of caught me by surprise. Didn't expect that to be one of the top things on the list. All right, Asian food also. He loved those deep fried vegetable things. So he enjoyed spaghetti. Number one thing though, and I left my mug on the desk. Number one thing, coffee. Okay, he loved his coffee. He also loved, for a sweet tooth, his mama's oatmeal chocolate chip cookies. All right, and I've sampled them. All right, and they're good. And so his favorite restaurants were Neighbors, which is just down the street. All right, and Sam's Deli. Now, my dad took me to Sam's Deli when I was probably 8 or 9 years old, so I've been acquainted with Sam's Deli for a long time. You are going to get to eat food from Sam's Deli when we finish in here, all right? All of you over there, no head start. No head start, because I know Sam's delivered already. And we sent out a notice for folks to make, from New Hope, homemade oatmeal chocolate chip cookies, all right? Some of them followed directions and they delivered homemade chocolate chip oatmeal cookies. Some didn't follow directions and they brought just oatmeal or just chocolate chip. And then some even threw some raisins in one, and we'll forgive them for that one. But he enjoyed classic rock. He enjoyed NCIS and Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune with his mom, all right, as they shared TV together. He also enjoyed World War II movies like The Great Escape and The Dirty Dozen and Westerns. You got to think, what kind of shocked me in all of this as we were putting this together is I always thought Brad was probably 10 to 15 years younger than I am, only to find out we're in the same decade. Okay, I've only got him by 4 or 5 years, so that makes me hate him all the more. He looks so good. His community service was his involvement with AA, because actually Brad shared he didn't really need AA. When he found Christ, it left. That doesn't always happen, but it does on occasions, and it did for Brad. But you see, Brad wasn't about himself. Brad was about others, and if he could make a difference with others, he wanted to be a part of that. His spiritual background got started here in March of 2018. It's the first record we have of him showing up at New Hope. And then I had the privilege of baptizing him right there, right where those flowers are. You take that top off, there's a baptistry there. And he didn't even mind when I asked him to step up on the step when I baptized him so everybody could see him. He jumped right up there with a big smile on his face. The bummer about his baptism is he didn't tell his family he was being baptized. And so none of them were here. It's horrible to be ticked over somebody about being baptized, but they were annoyed, and I understand. But it was a wonderful day for me to be able to share in that moment with him. You see, and that was the beginning of his transformation from alcohol dependent to Christ dependent. He was loved and he was appreciated at New Hope. How many of you are here and you are from New Hope? Raise your hands. You're part of the New Hope crowd. There they are in the back. Yeah, so, and there's more over in the other buildings. So he was loved and appreciated here. His first Sunday back after kind of the COVID shutdown, his first Sunday back to church, we had made some changes because we didn't have live stream before, and so there was a new booth in the back there, and of course, we didn't want to pass offering plates, down the rows like we used to do. So we put boxes at the doors. You'll see it over there. It doesn't have quite the same impact there because there's a stage here, so it looks like but there's boxes like that at the doors in the foyer. And so after that first Sunday morning he was back, he walks out to the back, and our associate pastor was there, Mark Addis. And he walks up to Mark with his envelope in his hand, and he said, who do I give this to? Where do I put it? And Mark said, well, we have boxes by the door. And he looks up at the box, and then he looks up at Mark and says, "Really? Really?" So you just couldn't help but love this guy. When I asked the family to describe him to me, here are some of the words that they shared. He was soft-hearted and compassionate, courageous and persevering. Remember, he was a 5-year cancer survivor. He knew no limits. Okay? He was respected. He never saw an obstacle, from his height to the battle with throat cancer to a struggle with alcohol addiction. He was a daredevil. He started with popping wheelies going over the McKinley ditch to jumping out of helicopters. Stairs never bothered him. Bothered his siblings. May have been a few fights, all right, as a result of that, but never bothered him. And the reason probably was because his mama treated him like everybody else. She showed no difference, and that impacted him. He was caring and helpful. He would give up vacation time so that cancer patients who he worked with could have a paycheck still, and he would do that generously. He was a loving son and brother, and he loved looking after his mom. That was part of his joy. Remember that coffee thing I mentioned, how much he loved? He also loved donuts with his coffee. And so much so that it clouded his judgment sometimes. He stopped on one cold morning in front of the 7-Eleven that was a regular habit for him, I understand, to get a cup of coffee and a donut. He left his truck running so it would stay warm while he went in and got the coffee and the donut. He wanted to satisfy his appetite. When he returned to the truck, it was gone. It was stolen. A very expensive cup of coffee that day. So he learned to curb his appeal for coffee after that just a bit. To get a few other reflections, we've got a few personal reflections that have come from one of his sisters and one of his brothers. So, Rebecca, you want to come on up and share what you've got for us today? You're going to do this.
Yes, I don't know.
That's all right. We'll stand here with you.
Okay. All right. So I thought maybe I overdressed. So I found this in the closet. A lot of you guys and gals will recognize it. Just a tiny bit might be a little bit redundant as to what the pastor said, but anyway.
Close to the mic.
Okay. As the pastor alluded to, death of a loved one has kind of a corrective reshaping in one's life. It serves as a means to draw one back to what's truly valuable. Suddenly, politics, people's opinions, recognition, your stuff becomes shallow, or at least put in their proper perspective. Brad's life, though, reflected a proper order. His relationship to God and his family and his friends were at the top of his list. Brad and I had much in common. We were both twins, as the pastor said, and born within 5 minutes of the one behind us. We both loved the mountains and the ocean, coffee. We both loved to work out. And it was kind of fun because I'd been into cycling for a number of years, and as the pastor said, Brad got a really cool bike this year, or a couple years ago actually now. In addition, Brad and I both struggled with our faith. We know that Brad came to faith initially in 1978, kind of set it aside, began again in 1992, stumbled again, and finally, 2.5 years ago, he began in earnest a serious investigation into the person of Jesus Christ. And it dawned on me recently that the historical accounts in the Bible included people like Brad and I. For example, the disciple Thomas, who even down to this age is known as Doubting Thomas. He said he wouldn't believe that Jesus rose from the dead unless he saw the holes in his hands and feet, and then he saw them. Peter, whose name translated means rock, the man of whom Christ said, "I'll build my church upon this rock," he was embarrassed to publicly acknowledge his faith. And so when asked if he was a follower, he was a denier. He said, "No, not me, you've got the wrong person." But like Brad and myself, with lots of doubts, denials, and questions unanswered, we couldn't explain the marvel, the beauty, the tiny seed that makes the giant redwood, the sheer magnificence of nature, without circling back to a God who is there and who is waiting patiently for all of us to circle back to him. Going through a lot of Brad's things, it's been so fun. Pictures have been wonderful. But we found some notes that he took at church, attending here with Pastor Tim. And these were some of the notes that he'd written down. Next to 1 Corinthians 6:18, it said, "My weakness." Another said, "Pray and listen." Still another said, "Jesus, be the center of my life." And lastly, he noted key principles. And it said, "Not alone, not abandoned, and never afraid." G.K. Chesterton once said, "Christianity has not been tried and found wanting. It has been found difficult and left untried." Well, Brad gave it one more try and discovered its truth. I thank you, Brad, for this time of recentering, of reminding me, all of us, what's really important in life. This is a fun story. Not long ago, Brad took his brother-in-law, Jim, and nephew, Peter, up in the Sierras to shoot. And I don't know a lot about guns, so some of the words I use might be wrong, but forgive me. So Jim said they were firing clips of 10 rounds, rapid fire, when Brad took his AR-15, stuck in a 30-round clip. Jim said Brad plopped down on his butt.
Shielding in a 12-round.
Or, see what I say? I don't know all the words. Okay. Anyway, sounded like a big gun to me. And he took this gun and he shot the 30 or whatever, a whole bunch.
The multi-shell clip.
Yeah. So I plopped on his butt, shot all those bullets, turned, grinned, and said, "That was fun." I love that. I could just see him doing that. St. Augustine said, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you." Glad you're finally resting, bro.
If you come up by the table after the service is over and look at some of the things that are here, of course, you'll see attire that he wore in his career and some of the patches and things that he was given. But on this side over here, you're going to notice his Bibles and his devotional books that are there. They're filled. The devotional books and the Bible are filled with the bulletins from Sunday services here. And every one of them, he took notes from the sermon on, all right? And so that was fun to go through and read a few of those as well. So please take your time afterwards to come up. To give you one more perspective, his brother. Frank, come on up. I don't need to be close by to hold your hand, do I? Okay, all right.
Anyway, this will be a little different than Beck's. I'm a former cop, and I just barely got out of high school back in '76. They wanted me out. I don't know why. I thought I was a good kid. Anyway, I'm not going to repeat a lot that was said, thanking folks, but I am going to thank Clyde Sally. I think he's our oldest cousin. He lives in Virginia now, and he put a Facebook post, and I can't read it, but it was fab. So, Clyde, we thank you if you're going to listen live stream. I guess I'll say this anyway. Out of the 7 kids, Brad and I were like angels. I mean, we never caused mom or dad any grief, whether in high school or in our professions. Him as a firefighter up in the forestry, and
You're at church.
he's got me covered. Okay. I like the high ground too. So up here, I like this. Anyway, so we all got, like they said, a bunch of stories to tell, but a couple recent ones. We talked about Brad's bike out in his pickup. Well, so he gets this thing from the shop. He heads straight to mom's house with it. And mom's there. I wish I could have been there with my phone videotaping this. Days. So Brad decides he's going to take it in the backyard and give it a spin. So for those of you that were around back in the late 60s, early 70s, you remember Laugh-In, right? Artie Johnson. So Brad gets on the bike, he takes about 3 pedals, and bam, he's down, okay? So those that don't know Artie Johnson and Laugh-In, then you won't get it, but that's okay, all right? And then another one, and this, then I'm going to wrap this up. If I'm talking too fast, I'm sorry. But anyway, a couple things that really got under Brad's skin. Stray cats. Yeah, whew, man. And then the neighbor's rooster and chickens come over the wall, and they're in the backyard. So it was one of those nights, Brad stayed at Mom's, gets up in the morning. Of course, Mom's in there reading a book or Instagram looking at pictures of all these kids, grandkids, great-grandkids. So Brad comes out, he's got his jeans on, his shoes, no shirt. He looks out, and there's that rooster and chickens in the backyard. So Mom said he gets this look, like, I'm going to get them. So he takes off out the back door, and Mom looks out, and he's chasing this rooster around the backyard. I mean, think about it, okay? So she says she's watching, all of a sudden he just stops, and he is just cracking up. I'm just laughing. So I'm thinking, he sits there, had to go, what am I doing? I'm 61 years old. Okay, anyways, so that's the rooster deal. Let's see. Got one right here. Anyway, Tim's already thanked everybody, his friends at the forestry. Thank you for being his friends. He loved that job. Gosh, he was still looking forward to this fire season. To the folks at the church that he's gone so close to, Pastor Tim, Pastor Mark, Cecil, and his buddy Wayne riding that Harley with the sidecar. They were 8 o'clock buddies, and they fought over the parking place where Brad's truck is. It's something else. Well, I better put my readers on. I wrote something small here. This is just kind of off the cuff, some of this stuff, so just hang on there. Okay. For some family here, local, on my wife's side, the Ramers, for Phil and Kimmy. That's about all I can say. For almost there. Paul, just being able to talk to Brad. And between Brad and Paul, Cat has 9 lives. Those guys got at least 500. I'm telling you, yeah. For them to be here was a miracle. The 2 guys, I called them miracle men. That's 2 of them. To his mentor, his pal, his buddy, my brother-in-law Don McClannon. Can't see anyone. Okay. Oh, wait. Dan Kuhn says tighten your stomach muscles. Okay. I got 2 left. I used to have more, but there's only 2. So I'm tightening them, and it's working, Dan. Thank you. To Pam, Mike, Randy, Rebecca, Brenda. Boy, we were blessed to have Brad for a brother. Mom, Brad watched over her 24/7, and he still is. Boy, I'm trying to get it tight or something working. Let's see. Told you this would be off the cuff here. My wife, Becky. Brad was, it was her guardian angel. All those times I worked nights. It wasn't me the bad guys had to worry about. It was my brother, Brad. Boy, he'd have got evil on those folks, I'll tell you. They could talk about things that Brad and I never talked about, so she's probably got some stories if you want to hear some good ones. And then for me, okay. Come on, all right. Come on, Dad, give me a hand here. It's like hunting gophers, I need some milk. So I've had 2 heroes in my life. That's my dad and my brother Brad. And I sure miss those big sweets. That's it.
You did good, buddy. You did good. You did good. I want to direct your attention to the big screen, and the family's put together a pictorial tribute, all right? So about 7.5 minutes of Brad's best, all right? Let's watch it. And Brad was not the only talented part of his family. You're going to get to hear from some other members of his family. I believe it's Brad's nephews. Does I have that right? All right, and these are all brothers, the Gerhart boys. All right, come on up and play and sing for us. The Old Rugged Cross.
This is Uncle Brad's favorite hymn.
On a hill far away stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame. And I love that old cross for the dearest and best. The world of sinners slain. So I cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown. Rugged cross, I will let it be true. His blame and reproach gladly bear, and then he'll call me someday to my home far away, where his glory forever I'll share. So I cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown.
Great job, guys. Thank you. We may have to have you back to New Hope some Sunday morning. Let me see if I can set perspective one more time, and then we're going to look to the scriptures for just a few minutes. There was one dark night outside of a small town, and a fire had started in a local chemical plant. Before long, it had exploded into big flames, and an alarm went out to other fire departments to come and help them. After fighting the fire for over an hour, the chemical company president showed up, and he approached the fire chief, and he said, all of the secret formulas are in the vault in the center of that building. They must be saved. I will give $50,000 to the engine company that brings them out safely. As soon as the chief heard this, he ordered his firemen to strengthen their attack on the blaze. After 2 more hours of fighting the fire, the president of the company said, I will give $100,000 to the engine company that brings out those secret files. From a distance, a long siren was heard, and another fire truck comes into sight. It was a local volunteer fire company composed entirely of retired firemen, 65 age and older. To everyone's amazement, that little fire engine raced through the chemical gates, drove right into the middle of the inferno. In the distance, the other firemen watched as the old-timers hopped off their rig, began to fight the fire with an effort they had never witnessed before. After an hour of intense fighting, the volunteer company had extinguished the fire and saved the secret formulas. Excited, the chemical company president announced, "I'm doubling the reward to $200,000." And he walked over to personally thank each of the volunteers. After thanking each of the old men, just because they're 65, they're old? And the president asked the group what they intended to do with their reward money. And the fire truck driver looked him right in the eyes and said, "The first thing we're going to do is fix the brakes on that old truck." See, necessity is the mother of invention, and crisis is the father of opportunity. And I hope today there may be an opportunity for us to maybe change some perspective about life, about death, and about eternity. I deliberated for several days the passage that I wanted to use for today, for encouragement to family, to friends, but also, most important of all, what I am confident Brad would want is to those of you who may be family or friends and you've never yet experienced a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. It's what transformed his life. It's what makes today a joyous occasion rather than a desperate, horribly sad occasion. And so I thought about a lot of passages, but I kept coming back to one, and then I kept thinking, no, I shouldn't go there. But finally, this is where I'm going today. You talked about characters out of the Bible that reflected moments of your life and experience, and Brad's, like Thomas and Peter. Well, I want to tell a story that's probably my most memorable biblical story from my Sunday school days. And it's found in the Gospel of Luke chapter 19, and it's about a character that's only mentioned in those 10 verses. You won't find him mentioned again anywhere else in Scripture. And his name is Zacchaeus. What do all of you know about Zacchaeus? Yeah, you learned the same song in Sunday school I did, didn't you? Yeah, the song goes like this. Zacchaeus was a wee, and they had hand signals, remember? Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he. For the Lord he wanted to see, he climbed up into a sycamore tree. And as the Savior passed by, he looked up into the tree and he said, "Zacchaeus, you come down. I'm going to your house today. I'm going to your house today." I want to read verse 10 before I read verses 1 through 9, because verse 10 is the purpose for what the story is all about. And I think it makes a difference if we know the purpose before you hear the story. And here's what verse 10 says. "For the Son of Man," that's Jesus, "for the Son of Man came to seek and to save those who were lost." That was the purpose of the life of Christ. And by the way, what I'm going to share over the next few minutes, I hope you don't walk out of here saying, "I don't want any of that religion," because I'm not here today to offer you religion. I don't give one penny. I can't say what I really wanted to say. I'm in church. I don't care if somebody's Baptist, Presbyterian, Methodist, or Catholic. There's a lot of folks who are going to be any and all of those, and they won't see Brad in heaven. Because it's not about religion that assures us of a place called heaven when we die. You see, a thief on a cross had no opportunity to be religious. He had the opportunity minutes before he died to make a decision about Jesus Christ, period. Jesus is the one who says, "I'm the way, I'm the truth, I'm the life. Anyone can come to the Father through me, but nobody gets there without me. I don't get there because I'm Baptist or Methodist or Presbyterian or Catholic. I get there based upon what my relationship with Jesus Christ is." You're here today because you had a relationship with Brad. Brad is in heaven today because he had a relationship with Jesus Christ. You don't get there because you had a relationship with Brad. You get there if you have a relationship with Jesus Christ. He came to seek and to save those who were lost. Let's look at the story of transformation in this man called Zacchaeus. That's a long name for a short man. So from now on, he's going to be called Zach today. All right? Jesus entered Jericho, and passing through, a man was there by the name of Zach. He was a chief tax collector, and he was wealthy, and he wanted to see who Jesus was. And being a short man, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead, and he climbed up in a sycamore tree, a fig tree, to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and he said, "Zach, come down now. I want to stay at your house." So he came down at once, and he welcomed him gladly. And all the people around saw this, and they began to mutter. Watch out for mutterers. They're always up to no good. He's gone to be the guest of a sinner. But Zach stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here now I will give half my possessions to the poor, and if I've cheated anybody out of anything, I'll pay back 4 times the amount." And Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to your house, because this man is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save that which was lost." Let me clarify one thing before I go into this. Number one, Zacchaeus did not go to heaven because he gave to the poor. Zacchaeus gave to the poor because Jesus changed his life. Brad's life changed these last 3.5 years, not because he came to New Hope, but because he had a relationship with Jesus Christ. So what I want to do for the next couple of minutes, remember, we started 14 minutes late. Remember that. We just want to look at the two characters of the story. We want to look at Zach, and we want to look at Jesus. So here's what we know about Zach. Zach in this story is the profile of a normal guy. Zach represents every person who doesn't yet have a relationship with Jesus Christ. They're just a normal person. You see, to normal people, it's us who are Christians that look weird. Okay? Zach was just normal. He was looking out for number one. Before I came into a personal relationship with Jesus, I was Zach. So were you if you have a relationship with Christ. A Zach is a person who is primarily concerned about themselves and their happiness. Here's a couple of ways in which each of us can relate to Zach. Number one, none of us really measure up to God. One thing we all know about Zach, he was vertically challenged. He was a short guy. I heard about a guy who went to a doctor's office for his physical one day, and the nurse asked him about his weight, and he said, "I'm 170 pounds. She had him step off the scales, and she said, "You weigh 200 pounds. The nurse then said, "How tall are you?" And he said, "I'm 6'1". She measured him and said, "You're actually 5 feet 9 inches. She started to take his blood pressure, and then he looked at her and said, "How can you expect my blood pressure to be normal? I came in here a tall, slender guy, and you've already made me short and fat." He just didn't measure up to the standard. When it comes to God's standard, all of us are vertically challenged. For Romans chapter 3, verse 23 says, "For all," who's left out of the word all? You? No, you. All of you are here, right? We're all included in that. Well, in this verse it says, "For all have sinned, and we have fallen short of the standard of the glory of who God is." When my sons were little, we lived, you mentioned the Ramers, my neighbors, all right? They were fine neighbors. The neighborhood improved when we moved out. But in that house, catty corner across the street from the Ramers, my boys, we moved in there when they were in kindergarten and second grade. And in each of their bedrooms, we started putting the mark on the doorway into each of their rooms, and we measured their heights. We moved out 3 years ago. My sons were already living on their own by then, but before we packed up everything and got out, I had them come over, and I put one last mark on each of the door frames. And on those marks, there was a place that got highlighted when each of them passed up my height, which wasn't a huge feat, by the way, all right? But they were so excited to get to be taller than their dad. On God's door facing into heaven, none of us can measure up to the righteousness of God the Father. We all fall short. But the fact is, God didn't want to leave us falling short. For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. But God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever will believe in him will not perish, but have everlasting life. Zach was also desperately seeking something in his life. He was rich, but he wasn't happy. You got any rich friends that aren't happy? You probably do. There was something missing in their life. The details of this story reveal that he was a desperate man. He was rich. He was dignified. Yet, what do we find him doing in this story? We find a grown man running down the street, climbing a tree. Let me ask you grown men that are in this room, when's the last time you climbed a tree? It's not what we do when we're grown men. That's what we did when we were kids. And yet this grown man runs like a kid, climbs a tree like a kid. Why? Because he wants to see Jesus. There's something missing in his life, and he's wondering, does Jesus have the answer? You see, Zach had an itch in his heart that his wealth couldn't scratch. He probably didn't even know exactly what it was that he needed. He just knew he needed something. Most of us have received those Publisher Clearinghouse sweepstakes letters in the mail, right? They even have our names personalized on it. Dear Tim, all right? Makes us think that they know who we are. They make us feel like we're one of just very few who have a shot at winning millions of dollars, and yet the odds are not good. There was a funny thing that happened a few years ago. A computer generated a personal letter to Bushnell Assembly of God Church in Tampa, Florida. The church got a letter that said, get this, it literally happened. Dear God of Bushnell Assembly, we've been looking for you. You were a finalist to receive $11 million sweepstakes, so don't just sit there, God. Return your sweepstakes form today. The Tampa Tribune interviewed the pastor, who said he didn't plan on returning the form because God already had a lot more than $11 million. Now that is funny, but when I read the phrase, God, we've been looking for you, I thought it spoke the truth. People are looking for something. They often don't know it's God. Zacchaeus was looking for something, and he was going to check Jesus out. The other character in this story is Jesus himself, the purpose of a loving God. We can see Zacchaeus in ourselves. We've all been there, and some of you might be there at this very moment. You're searching for something. You've got an itch you can't scratch. The good news is, while you are searching, God is also looking for you. That's why Jesus came to planet Earth 2,000 years ago. It's why he died on a cross that's behind Brad's picture. He came looking for us. Jesus Christ came on the greatest search and rescue mission in history. Today, because of Brad's profession, we could say Jesus came on the greatest fire rescue in history. He wants to rescue every one of us from the fires of hell and promise to us a home in heaven. Zach in this biblical story was lost, and Jesus came all the way from heaven to find him. I don't know if you realize where this happens in the Bible. This happens just 2 days before Palm Sunday. This is really the last personal contact Jesus has in bringing somebody into a relationship with himself until he hangs on the cross and he leads the thief to Christ. Zacchaeus is the last one. It's amazing. Jesus came looking for him. He desperately needed him. You see, God knows you. Do you understand that? The first word that Jesus spoke to the guy up the tree, he didn't say, what are you doing up there? He didn't say, who are you? The first word out of Jesus' mouth as he looked up the tree was this, Zacchaeus. He knew his name. He'd never been introduced to him yet, and he knew his name. He knows your name, John. He knows your name, Martha. He knows your name, Mary, Cherie, Dan. He knows you by name. Do you realize if God has a refrigerator in heaven, your picture is on that refrigerator door? He knows you. Zacchaeus' name literally means righteous. He was not living up to his name at that point in his life. We could say from the family's own perspective, Brad wasn't living up to who God wanted him to be a few years ago. But that didn't stop God from seeking him. And it certainly made it easier for Brad to find him. Last night, my wife decided that we should have barbecue chicken salad from Sequoia Sandwich. It's one of our favorites. And so went over there to get it, ordered it, waited for them to prepare it. Young man from the back brings out the bag and hands it to me, and he says, thank you for coming here today, Tim. And I had already grabbed the bag and was on my way out the door as he was saying that, and all of a sudden, it wasn't a thank you that I heard, it was my name. And I stopped to turn around to ask him, because I'd never met this guy. He didn't even take my order. How do you know my name? And before I could ask the question, he had a big smile on his face. He said, it's on your shirt. Got one that says New Hope Church, and it's got my name across the top, and I'd forgot I was even wearing it. But he called me by name. You and I don't even have to wear a name tag shirt. God knows our name. Isaiah 43:1 says, fear not, I've redeemed you. I've called you by name, and you are mine. Jesus also knows what we need, and that is we need a relationship with Him. Jesus said to Zacchaeus, come down, I'm going to your house for dinner. You know what some of those other people that thought they were religious that were there on the street that day, do you know what they thought Jesus should have said? Because remember, the mutterers, they complained that Jesus was going to go to the house of a sinner. He was a tax collector, he was a cheat, he was basically a thief with government approval. And you know what? Yeah, some of you are thinking right now, oh, I know some of those. They thought that Jesus should have said to Zacchaeus, you're a thief, you're a scoundrel. I would never go to your house unless you change your ways. That's what religion tells us. What a relationship with Jesus is Jesus says, I want to come hang out at your house. I want to come hang out with you. I want to spend my life with you. Would you like to spend your life with me? You see, Jesus doesn't come to condemn, He comes to save. There was a hymn, I suspect, knowing the dates you gave about his first relationship with Christ when it first got started. And the fact that he loved the old rugged cross tells me there's probably another hymn he would have known as well. It's one I grew up on called What a Friend We Have in Jesus. I love the third verse in that song. It goes like this, have we trials and temptations? Brad would have said yes, wouldn't he? Is there trouble anywhere? We're just coming out of COVID. We should never be discouraged. Why? Take it to the Lord in prayer. Can we find any so faithful who will all our sorrows share? Jesus knows our every weakness. Take it to the Lord in prayer. And last, Jesus sees us not as we are, but as who we can become. Brad is far different today than he was 3 weeks ago tomorrow. And Jesus, 3.5 years ago, saw the Brad that he could become. God sees you for who you can become. Zacchaeus didn't live up to his name as righteous, but when he met Jesus, all the past was gone and all the new had come. That's his promise. Some of you are saying, Tim, I already have a relationship with Jesus Christ. I really didn't need to hear this sermon today. Great. For those of you who don't have a personal relationship with Him, I hope you've heard enough today that you know you can have one. And it's not complicated. Brad, I found out this after the fact. Brad got his heart right with the Lord, sitting on a pew right back there. I didn't even know the day that it happened. I found out months later. Sitting where you are right now, driving in your car on the way home, but if you pray on the way home and you're driving, keep your eyes open. God will hear that prayer just as well, but God will hear your prayer anywhere, and it's a simple prayer. God, thanks for finding me, and thanks for helping me find you. I don't understand all there is to know about the Bible. I don't understand all there is to know about Jesus, but I've heard enough in my lifetime. I've seen enough to know I don't have the answers for my life, and I want to put my trust in you. Come live in my life. Thank you for forgiving me of my sin. Use your own words. A thief on a cross said, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And what did Jesus say? Today you'll be with me. I wouldn't recommend you cut it quite that close. It's a little tight for me, but that's how much God pursues us to our very last breath. But for those of you who already have a relationship with Christ, let me ask you this about this story. What did Zacchaeus need in order to see Jesus? He needed a tree to climb up. He couldn't find him on his own. He needed a tree in order to see. You and I can be somebody's tree. We can give them a boost. We can lift them a little higher from their circumstances so they can finally see Christ. Let me close. It's a story of a young fireman. In the midst of a blaze, he stepped forward and he volunteered to rescue a little baby in a burning building. Even though the chief had said the flames were too strong and the building was too unstable, this young fireman was able to get to the girl and hand her out the window and into a rescue net. The building then collapsed and he was killed. 20 years later, at a graveside with a statue of a fireman for the headstone, stood a 20-year-old weeping woman. A man stopped by and politely and caringly asked, "Is this your father or your brother?" And she replied, "No, this is the man who died for me." Jesus Christ is the one who died for every one of us. All you have to do is invite him in. Would you join with me as we pray? Our Father in heaven, I am so grateful that you gave me a blessing I didn't deserve and I didn't earn it and I had no right to it. And I am so grateful for the privilege of getting to be Brad's pastor these last 3 years. I'm so grateful that we got to become friends. I'm extremely grateful to stand here and do my best from a human perspective that has so many limits to it, to honor a man who meant so much to so many. A man who stood head and shoulders above so many others with his caring, with his compassion, with his givingness, with a testimony that reflects what true transformation really is. What I have done and what I once was does not have to determine my final outcome. So, Father, thank you. Thank you for the privilege of Brad being a friend. Father, I share with you the needs of those who've gathered in this building and the building on the other part of the property. And thank you for the opportunity that we have had to pay tribute to a man who touched all of our lives. And Father, thank you for the difference that this day may have made in the lives of some of Brad's friends and family. A day in which Brad's own story has been a key component to them coming to a place like Zacchaeus came to when Jesus said, "I'm coming to your house for dinner." They're allowing Jesus to come in their life because that's what changes our eternal destiny. Thank you, Father, for the comfort and the hope that you offer to us on a day like today. If it wasn't for Jesus Christ living, dying, and being raised from the dead, we may have well just gone to a bar and got drunk today, because death would be the most horrible thing in the world. But Father, for a believer, death is not an end of anything. It's the beginning of the most incredible period of our life that will never end. And so thank you for the hope that you bring to us. We commit this to you in Jesus' name. Amen and amen. All right. I want to thank Farewell. Bob is here from Farewell along with his staff for all the service that they provided to this family. Thank you for taking good care of our own family here today. Bob is going to lead the family out. You've never led a family out this big, possibly. All right, this is a big group. Yeah. And so Bob's going to lead you out, and what I'm going to ask family to do is for you guys, Bob, lead them all the way over to the barn. All right, it's not that big of a walk, but I'm going to have them lead the whole family all the way over to there. I'm going to ask you to remain seated while he takes them out those double set of doors. So, Bob, if you would take them on out, then I'll give the